Hey guys, this is the Synth Doctor here, and kicking it off on the very first video. What we have here is a Prophet 5 Rev 3.3. It was originally a 3.2 from the factory, and we are going to be upgrading the power supply. So this is a full-fledged restoration to resurrect this beast back from the grave. And these power supplies, like a lot of vintage gear, are pretty poorly designed. Particularly this transformer has two secondary taps that are 22 volts, and you have your plus and minus 15 volt analog rail, to run the audio and everything else, which is okay. And then there's a 5 volt rail which runs the microprocessor, the Z80, all the TTL circuitry, and dissipating 22 volts down to 5 volts results in quite a bit of heat, and especially when these are equipped with a MIDI board, that extra current draw just really can't be carried by the supply. So actually, like, my personal unit would crash after running for about 10 minutes, and you would see the regulator go into thermal limit. So these supplies can be rebuildable. Here is one that was rebuilt by another tech here. See, I got those big Nichicon mains caps on there, upgraded rectifier diodes. And a mod that they do from the factory, and a lot of people like to do, is adding a diode between the 5 volt regulator and ground. And what this does is boost that output voltage just a little bit more. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't handle the added current, so that is not going to help us. It will still go into thermal limit, thermal runaway, and that 5 volt regulator will shut itself down. So what we have here was a collaboration between a good friend of mine who's a veteran electrical engineer, and he specializes with analog and power supply design, and he made me this beautiful new power supply few years ago. It's been running in my personal P5 for well over 3 years with no issues. And what's great about this is it features, lo and behold, surface mount technology. But what he did was he actually used a switcher, and what that does is that knocks that 22 volts down to roughly 8 volts, and that's something that the regulator can more easily dissolve, and it results in a lot less heat dissipation, and we can get into numbers and whatnot later. And a lot of people go, oh no, the switcher, it's noisy. Well, guys, hate to break it to you, the TTL logic and the microprocessor board are a lot noisier than any switcher on this power supply are going to be, so there's nothing to worry about there. And in the event the switcher does fail, if it does short, that analog regulator, he still places a more higher current regulator after that switcher. So that ensures that even if that voltage does swing back to the 22 volts, that's not going to blow up everything on your CPU board. That's still going to go through that regulator, which will go into thermal limit, shut down, but it will protect the rest of the synth. And I believe there's some shunting diodes on there as well. So we're going to go ahead and install that today. You can see we got handy instructions here. Bear with me, this is my first time shooting a video. I'm gonna find my way. But the first step is what you should really do, just to be sure, is go ahead and write down all your voltages. So I went ahead and just labeled all the wires, where they're going on the existing supply. And the tools you're going to need are a good iron. Got a Weller over there. You can see there's an Odyssey hanging out on the other side of the bench. And you're going to need a desoldering gun. Now here is my trusty Hakko FR301, which was acquired last year. I used to use something a little simpler, right? And it did work fine. It's got a heated suction bulb here. And this guy carried me well for quite a few years, but unfortunately on the more sensitive dual-sided boards, I damaged some traces, and as you start to do this more, it's nice to invest in some better tools. Some people have good luck with the pens that you heat it up with a regular iron and suck it out, but use what works best for you. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do via the instructions are we are going to remove, there are 3 screws and nuts holding these original regulators in. So we're going to go ahead and remove those, swing these regulators out, and then we will work on loosening the clamps holding the filter caps here, and this will allow the supply to come away from the chassis. Alright, we're just undoing the last guy here. So you got to hold this with a quarter socket on the back to hold the nut. My nuts are too tight. Alright, there we go. And now we can get the last screw out. Make sure you don't lose a lock washer on the back. This requires surgical precision here. Don't worry about the Formica insulators. We are going to be replacing those with some self-adhesive sill pads. So now you see that these regulators will pop out of their cubby holes. I already can see how severely oxidized the top of these regulators are, so that's no good. So what we're going to do next is we're actually going to remove the entire heatsink. Now, most people don't really do this, but I find that the most thorough way to clean all of the old crusty heatsink compound is just to pull that whole heatsink off. Then we can remove those Formica insulators I was talking about, and you'll see, we'll clean it all up, make it nice, and then we'll go ahead and loosen the clamps and pull the whole power supply out of here. Alright, and magic moment here. You can see that we have the heatsink, we have this nasty thermal compound that I doubt is doing its job all these years later, and as you can see, grab a tool over here. Actually looks like there's two insulators here, so we have this clear one, and we have another Formica one behind it. So looks like they stacked up two from the factory, maybe in hopes of not allowing these to make contact with the aluminum. This is bad news bears, by the way. There's some insulators here, and you do not want the body of these regulators to touch this. Not good. So we are going to replace these with self-adhesive sill pads. So we won't even need the thermal compound, and because there were two of these, that thermal ability would have been inhibited anyways. Some people say the thermal compound is, I believe, scientifically speaking, transfers heat better than sill pads. But in this case, guys, it's not the space shuttle, and the fact that we need to make sure it stays insulated, all these layers here are no way going to be better than having a single sill pad. So that's what we'll do when we install this. So underneath the 40 years of road rash, as we'll call it, there are two flathead screws here, and these hold the remaining power supply clips off. And if I was a betting man, I would not be surprised if these are so rusted. Well, it looks like we got one. Guys, definitely replace rusty screws. I can't tell you, I was so upset when I got my Profit and all the screws and everything was all corroded. If they're corroded, just replace them. So now we're going to flip this guy up, and the supply is no longer going to be mounted to the chassis, so just make sure you hold it so it's not banging around all over the place. And you can see that it is now free. So what we're going to do next is remove all these wires one at a time, even though we wrote them down. Alright, we want to be good here, and we are going to set all the wires up one at a time, move them over to the new supply, and we'll get that sorted out. First things first though, let's clean this nasty heatsink. Alright, so what we got here are some nasty parts, some leftover Thai Tupperware takeout. You gotta use Thai, guys. If you use any other type of food, it's not gonna work. I'm just kidding. Horrible sense of humor. And last but not least, you're gonna need the good stuff here. I like to use 99.9% IPA when cleaning flux or any sort of general residue. That is 0.1% water there. So if you use like 70% and stuff, it's okay, but it takes a long time to evaporate, and generally I just like to use the pure concentrate stuff. It seems to clean up very nicely and it works for me. So what we're going to do here is make a redneck parts washer. I'm just going to throw your screws in here. Now it's all these other pieces that are caked with nasty thermal compound, and we're just going to pour some of this stuff in here. It's probably like $1 worth right there, but that's all right. Then you're gonna put your lid on, although I could see somebody has stabbed a hole in here, so we're gonna be careful. I actually have a glass jar to do this. I don't know where it is. And this lid is probably not gonna want to seal. Not a big deal. Just basically do a little tornado action there, and that's gonna help take all the crap off of there. And in the meantime, just take all these pads off. We're gonna put some IPA on a paper towel and just clean it up. Straightforward. Easy. Take one of them. Gotta change size here. I want this to be very clean. Just go speed up. Do magic thing. Alright, that looks acceptable to me. I'll hold it 3 more times, I can help it. That's alright. The Synth Doctor likes everything to be done the right way. Here we go, man. Alright, so we have extracted these screws. I'm probably going to speed this part up. Maybe. Extracted the screws from the parts washer. So we cleaned everything up. Now I'm going to put this heatsink back. I also wiped the back of this with IPA. There's these little rubber grommets, or maybe they were rubber at one point in time, but now they're hard. That's okay, though that will insulate the supply. So go ahead and get these started by hand. And we're just going to reattach this. And after this, we will continue work on the supply. Alright guys, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to line the new supply up here. And it's got holes. Now this kit came with all the standoffs, seal pads, everything you need. Now I can always tell why people fight with the camera, because it doesn't focus. So we got the standoff. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually use the power supply itself as a template. And we're going to mark the holes, and we're going to have to drill 4 holes. So this is like the only invasive part of this whole mod, is just drilling 4 little holes to mount the new bolts. So take Mr. Silver Sharpie here, because we're working on a black surface. So you want to line it up about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch away from the back of the chassis, and you'll see that the silk screen of the board, where these wires, there's 3 set of wires for each regulator. So you want to shift this side to side and just get that so they're vertically lined up with each little cubby over here. That way the regulators will mount nicely, and they're on wires, so you got some wiggle room, so not a big deal. So I'm going to press down on the filter caps here, so I hold it steady. I'm just going to do the twist and shout here with the Sharpie in each hole. And if we do this correctly, which I promise you we will, or I hope at least, when I pull, oh, hold on, definitely want to get transferred there. Now, okay. Now when I remove this supply, look at that, Mr. Silver Sharpie saves the day. So you see we got 1, 2, 3, 4 holes. So what I'm going to do is going to get a knockout punch. I'm going to punch each one of these, and then I'm going to drill them out with a .125 drill bit. For all those math wizards out there, you can convert that to a fraction, because I'm not doing it. Okay guys, so we got here the spring loaded punch. So what we're going to do is go to each Sharpie hole here. I'm going to very carefully line this up in the middle of my hole. And then, oh, very carefully. You got to do this first so the bit doesn't chase. So now, it's loud as hell, but we're just gonna put a divot inside of each one of these 4 holes, and then the drill bit we need is 1/8 of an inch. So that'll be coming up next. Alright guys, so we got the drill ready, and because this is aluminum, this should be very easy to drill. So because we did our thing here, and you can see I got a nice bit here with the little stepped point, probably can't see, but that'll go into the divot. Won't wiggle around. And there we go. There's hole number 1. So we're gonna do this 3 more times. Alright guys, so we're back, and the kit supplies all the hardware you need. So the first thing we're gonna need are the standoffs and these long screws. So we're gonna drop each screw through the holes we just drilled. And you may want to clean up the holes. I forget the name of the tool. I have one yet. You stick it in there and twirl it around, and it's a deburring tool. That's what it is. So now, through a little finessing, you're gonna jack it up on here, get a board of wood or something, and I'm gonna come underneath, and basically you're gonna thread the standoff into the screw. So gonna need another Phillips to hold the end here, and we can tighten this up in a bit. So I'm gonna go through, screw all these in, then we'll come back with you and show you. Okay, so now I left these standoffs a little loose just to help with the fitment. So we're not gonna put the nuts on, but we're just gonna line the supply up and make sure that everything fits nicely. And okay, so the supply snapped into place. So the next step is we have these secondary wires coming off the transformer, and we're going to remove these. So what I like to do, barely got any left. This is a solder I use, guys. It's caster stuff from NTE. It's very good with the old circuit boards. It's the 60-40, 60% tin, 40%, and it's rosin core, so it has flux inside of the solder itself. So anytime I do any sort of desoldering, I always like to add some fresh solder first. I know it sounds a little counterintuitive. Oop, I'm getting a little scare there. But this old solder can be very difficult to heat sometimes. And by us adding some fresh stuff, it'll melt a little easier when we go ahead and use the Hacko gun. So there's some thick traces on this PSU. So it's going to take a little longer heating duration. Okay, so basically we have some fresh solder. Now you can do this two ways. Since we're just pulling wires, theoretically you could heat this up and just pull the wire all the way through. I'm going to be a little more methodical in my approach. I'm going to bring Mr. Hacko over here. Okay, so again, clean it. Like to add some fresh solder just to the tip, just to help, and we'll come right over, and that'll suck that pad nice and clean. Okay, and now we have all these leads pulled right out. So now that the supply is free, we're going to go ahead and install these wires. So they already look to be a good length, and they're already tinned because we pulled them out. So we have the reds are the secondaries, and we have our common, which is black. So the black is going to go to the middle terminal. You're going to need a little baby screwdriver here. So I'm going to go ahead and fight with this on camera. So we got the first wire in. And it's just a nice little terminal block, so this is good because it still makes the power supply serviceable. You don't need any soldering to remove it, which I like that. And as you can see, I didn't even get the wire in. Okay, so you gotta make sure that you open this up far enough. I think we're in. Yeah, there we go. So you stick that wire in. Now you tighten. Okay. So always give a little tug. There we go. There she is. So we're going to loosen these up. Make sure that we open up our window of opportunity. So next is the common. And again, it does not matter which of these primaries go where. They end up being used for the both the plus and minus 15 volt rail. So you don't have to worry about any sort of polarity. Okay. So that common's in there. Last but not least, we have our final wire. All right, and we have this final secondary. So we're going to confirm, giving a little tug on each one. They're all in there. So good. Now we're wired up. Alright guys, we're going to do what I like to call the smoke test here. So this means that we plug everything in and see if it blows up in our face or not. So just remember, whenever you're dealing with power supplies or capacitors, don't put your face in it when you test it. Okay? Also, I am not liable here if you get hurt or electrocuted. Use common sense. Don't touch any wires. I got my DMM here. Touch the probes. We are working with the mains voltage, so we got that hooked up to the power strip. Like I said, you're going to need a DMM, so I got my old trusty Tektronix here. Going to set it to DC voltage. What we're going to do is check the plus minus 15 volt rail and also the 5.7 volt rail that's used to supply the digital logic. So, with my face away, I will turn the synth on. One last thing. It is very important that these regulators do not touch the chassis or they do not touch the supply. So, count my blessings here, but this wire is nice and stiff. It's holding them up and they are floating in outer space. So what we're going to do is pick up a ground. The supply is labeled. So we're going to get a ground here. I'm going to check my plus 15 volts. So you can see I'm pretty much right on the money there, 15.02. And again, we're going to dial this in when we have the whole synth up and running under load. This is just kind of a quick sanity check. So we're going to come over next and check the 5.7 volt rail. And again, looks pretty good. A little on the high side, but that's okay. Under load, this all changes. And finally, let me flip my leads around. We're going to check minus 15. So let me grab that, grab ground, and 50.003. You ain't gonna get any better than that, baby. So supply looks pretty good. I'm gonna shut it off, and now we're gonna work on desoldering all the wires off the original supply one at a time, and we're going to move them over to the new supply. Okay guys, so we're going to pull the supply back off, standoffs, and now what's real important is that you label where all these wires go. So you'll see, it starts off with a white here. There's two whites, so I just put some green stripes on here. And that's my minus 15, okay, which I wrote on my sticky note over here. So label all these. You got the white and green, or whatever color you choose, minus 15. Both blacks are ground. You have your minus 5, which is gray. Your plus 12, which is orange, and then you have your plus 15, which is yellow over here, and another white, which is your V plus, which is the 22 volts. So we're gonna go ahead, and I recommend that you remove one wire at a time and move it over to the appropriate spot on the new power supply. That way there's no confusion, and you can see it's upside down here, but the new supply's got everything oriented in essentially the same position. I believe exactly the same. Okay, so just gonna add some solder, like I said before, to each of these wires we're taking off. And then we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna remove them the same way like I did earlier on the primary side, one at a time, and we're gonna transfer those over to the new supply. So some Prophet 5s have the wires here on the regulators. My other one actually had them directly attached to the board, and it just puts a lot of stress on them. The wires are kind of like a strain relief. You really don't want to put any stress on the leads to those regulators because they will split and crack and can short things out, and at the end of the day that's not what you want. So okay, I'm gonna finish this up here. Alright, awesome. And we're gonna start by removing the minus 15 wire. So I'm holding it on the other side of the board. And we're gonna clearly pull that out. Okay, so now we undo the maze. Again, if you know what you're doing, then you can go ahead and pull them all off, which I might do here shortly. But it's good to kind of pace yourself. So now we just took minus 15, minus 15. So now what I'm going to do is get that into the hole here, and I'm going to need all the help I can get holding this. So I'm going to go ahead and solder this in, and then you're just going to repeat this one at a time and do all the wires, and you'll be good. Alright guys, so we got the new supply back on here. All the wires are attached. I verified they're correct. So last but not least, we got 4 nuts over here. So we're gonna anchor the board down on the standoffs. And then finally what we'll do is we're gonna come in and put some new sill pads. These are self-adhesive. We're gonna line it up on here, and these new regulators are gonna mount on the sill pad. So in this kit, you'll see that it actually came with new spacers because these old ones could possibly wear out and get crushed. So I'm going to show you, but basically you want to put the spacer on the screw like this, okay? And that's going to go through the regulator. So this is an insulator, okay? The sill pad will be there. It's going to go through the hole, and on the other side you're going to use the original lock washer and then the nut. And you just want to get these nice and snug, okay? You don't want to over tighten them, because if you crush this washer, okay, you're going to short the package here of the TO220 to ground, and that's not good. You don't want to short the regulators out. So we'll be right back, and then we are done. Hey guys, how's it going? So now we did the sill pads, we mounted all the regulators. So very important, we got to resuscitate. No, just kidding. We have to make sure the regulator body is not shorted to ground. So I'm gonna measure continuity from the sequencer or jacks out here, and see if I probe somewhere in the chassis with some bare metal. All right, I got continuity. So if I touch these screws, I have continuity. That's bad. We don't want the beep. So I'm gonna touch the metal package on the regulator, each one. Can we see? Oh, we can see. Oh, I touched the screw. There we go. So screw, continuity. Metal part, no continuity. Metal part, no continuity. So that's great. So now it's safe to power up. So let's do one more smoke test, and then we have the final smoke test when we plug it into the synth. So I'm going to turn it on. Okay. Let's check our voltages one last time. So I'll come down here. It's going to be reversed because I have the leads reversed. So I see 15, I got negative 15 volts here. Let's move the meter over here. Okay, so that's minus, I just have them flipped. Okay, now we go back to normal. I should have 15 over here, which I do. And on the 5.6, I don't know if I can actually get to it because this wire is so tightly pulled around the board. Let's see. Oh, there we go, 5.7. Beautiful. So now, I'm gonna turn it off. We're gonna bring Mr. Prophet back over here, and I'm gonna plug the umbilical cord, and we're gonna see what happens. Now, the synth's gotta be fully restored, so I don't expect any miracles. I have to replace all of the tantalum capacitors, all over the voice board, all over the CPU board. Gonna pull the entire key assembly out, polish the bus bars, go through, and then we're gonna methodically from that point troubleshoot what else is wrong with the synth. Basically, I just wanted to address the power supply, make sure that she's got a good healthy heart here to power the instrument, and I'm just gonna turn it on because I'm gonna fix it anyways, and I want to see where I stand with the instrument. So stay tuned. All right guys, the synth is back together, and we're gonna power it up and see what happens. So as you can see, nobody's home. Hey guys, how's it going? Back a little later here. And I know I said that, whenever you deal with this vintage gear, anytime you see these guys, these tantalum capacitors, you absolutely should replace these. A lot of times before powering the gear up, okay? What I do over here, like I said, I know I'm going to repair this instrument properly anyways, so I just want to get a general bill of health and see kind of where it sits before I go into it. So, of course, it's plagued with the tantalum caps. I did happen to take a peek inside after that last video, and pretty quickly I was able to figure out that the 15 volt rail that's supplied to the analog board that has all the filters, envelopes, oscillators was shorted. And sure enough, I checked the tantalum cap and it had continuity to ground. So I went ahead and just pulled that cap out. I checked all the other caps in circuit, which normally you don't want to test components in circuit, but if these caps are shorted, you are going to see a dead short because it's the path of least resistance. And there was another capacitor I had tested in the ADD section that was reading relatively low resistance. So I went ahead and I just replaced all of at least the decoupling capacitors, the larger ones, with ones that I had on hand. And I left the tantalums alone in the filter section. And when I get the rest of the parts in, don't worry, I'm going to pull all the boards back out and we're going to revisit it. And I'm going to show you exactly how to troubleshoot and what to look at. I'm just impatient and I want to know. So this synth before would actually boot and it would pass auto tune, but there wouldn't be any sound, and there would just be a garbled noise that would come up like you heard, and it would just emit this constant crap, and you turn it off and it'd fade away. So now if I power the synth up, we can see it's going to run the auto tune algorithm. I don't know if you can tell, the tune light is on indeed. Okay, and now I got 11 on here, and there's garbage loaded into the presets, but I went ahead and dialed a preset up. And the one thing I noticed is that the range of the synth is very off. So that's the highest note I can get on oscillator A. And we can go down to being completely inaudible. Oscillator A should not do that. Shouldn't go this low. So that's not right. And of course, my tune knob I had to fiddle with to get it in tune with A440. So I just wanted to do a general run through and see what was working. So obviously the key contacts are terrible, but I can sweep the filter. There's resonance. If I set long release, I have 5 voices. Every time you hit tune, by the way, it'll reset the voice assigner. So then you can just iterate through them. Well, wait till it finishes. So I have 5 working oscillators on the oscillator A group. I know my envelope generator works. I was able to write to memory, turn it off, and the battery was reading, 3.1 volts, so I know the battery is fine. Also, if I come over here, I'm able to modulate the pulse width. The duty cycle seems a little weird on oscillator A. It's not quite really a square wave, and of course all these pots jump all over the place. Again, I'm just doing a general run through. Usually, even when I get them up and going and they're this bad, if you kind of know the nature of the beast and you know how to pull on the pots and kind of fiddle and get it to a place where it's happy, one of the easiest ways to tell if you have a bad pot or continuity or between the boards is the duty cycle of these LEDs will actually slow down. So the profit is clocked at a whopping 2.5 megahertz. So when you actually play notes and touch things, you'll see the LEDs actually flicker. So if you have a constant flickering, you know that somewhere you have a digital value reflected by these pots that's unstable and it's jittering. But yes, I'm able to get my pulse width. The LFO is working. I can switch. I have not done the polymod section yet, so we can go ahead and try that if we turn polymod on. I'll bring you guys over here, get a closer look at what I'm talking about on the good old Prophet 5. Alright, how's that? So we dial the polymod up, and I'm going to assign the pulse width of oscillator A to the envelope generator. And that's working. So you can hear that infamous polymod. And frequency, we're not going to notice anything in the frequency here, because when we get over to oscillator B, you'll hear that something is not right. So let's turn oscillator B up. I'm going to turn the waveform on first. There we go. So oscillator B also has the same low range shifted where I can't get a high note out of it. And also, I can tell something's wrong with the control voltages because in oscillator A, every note is the same. What's cool is that I can actually gate 5 Cs and they're all in tune. So I know that the 5 oscillators are good. So I can tell based on my experience that that's a control voltage problem. And to confirm that, when we enter unison mode, which stacks those oscillators, we can hear that really fat 5 oscillator stack, but they're still playing the same note. Whereas if I kick over to oscillator A, we're in unison, but as you can see, I can play a C scale there. So on the Sickly Prophet 5, I'll give you a quick demo. Hear her sing, and then I will turn her off and order all the rest of the parts I need, and we're going to methodically troubleshoot the remaining issues. You can hear the keys are really bad, but we'll get there. This is obviously a great sign of life to come from this instrument. It's been sitting, I believe, for close to 15 years, something like that, 20 years, and it just sat in a flight case that unfortunately the foam disintegrated, so you could see all the silk screen is screwed up on these. So we're going to order new knob caps for this. I'm going to treat the wood here. The wood's actually in great shape, and really overall for its age, the instrument is not bad at all. As you can see, I'm going to get a new badge over here, and we're going to restore this and make this as close to factory new in the box, if not even better, as we can. And that's really my goal here. Is I don't just like to bring these things back to life and just get them to work and throw them out the door. I really spend a lot of time, and I really take these synths personally. I'm very nostalgic towards this older technology, and I have a lot of patience to sit there, and not only as an engineer but also as a musician. I can notice all the little nuances and things that are wrong, as far as scaling and filter performance and the brightness and attack times and levels that are, that vary voice to voice, or a lot of people may not notice because they don't really play or they don't have a really acute ear. So I really take my time with these synths, and I want to make them as perfect as I possibly can and also future-proof them. And that's why that power supply is one of those things that I really like to do with the Prophet. I know once I put that in there, that's going to outlive the rest of the synth, and from there, putting all the better spec capacitors and other bits and pieces in, we can really make a reliable, nearly 40-something-year-old instrument. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and hopefully we'll be back next week with some updates. Peace. Hey guys, we are back one last time. Last night I was a little tired, and of course, because the memory contained garbage, you have to go into manual mode. And when you first enter manual mode, none of the oscillators are selected, none of the waveforms are selected, and of course, the keyboard assignment for oscillator 2 was not selected. So lo and behold, when I went ahead and punched keyboard, and of course it's way out of tune, I have to crank it way up. But what would you know that we have two oscillators, or two groups of oscillators, so all 10 oscillators are working, so there's nothing wrong with that. So really the only issue is that the entire range of the keyboard is shifted down quite a few octaves. Like I showed you, that highest note wasn't very high. And I saw a burned up tantalum capacitor in the A to D circuit. Very briefly I checked it and it had a pretty low resistance, so I believe that that is the issue, but of course we're going to address that. But as you can see, the Prophet plays just fine, minus the terrible keys.